I think Mark is in the studio with us, I believe, and we have a bunch of questions for him. Hey, dude, how are you, man? All good? Man, we would totally wish we could be having this conversation in person and, be chilling out in Singapore, but what can we do, right? Like, stupid COVID, man.
I've been in lockdown for the last 2 months or something, so my hair's starting to get wild.
Yeah, I need a haircut as well, man.
I think we were just allowed to have a haircut like last week.
We've been on lockdown for like 18 months, bro. Like we haven't left the country, right? Since my last trip was like February of 2020. So yeah, it's kind of weird, man. Kind of weird. Anyway, what's new, man? How's things with Azimuth? How's the team? How's everybody doing?
Yeah, it's doing really great. Everything's been, obviously working around COVID restrictions and not being able to travel has been kind of annoying. I would have really liked to have gone to Black Hat and various other conferences that ended up getting cancelled. But otherwise, things are going good. I timed the keynote before I gave it, and it was like an hour and 10 minutes. So I was speeding through it.
You nailed it, dude. I mean, it was like 1 hour and 1 minute. I think I was looking at the counter. I'm like, yeah, man, that's like super. I mean, we always prefer speakers that have a slightly longer presentation because we've got guys who like we give them an hour, right, and then they rush through their presentation and they finish in half an hour. So we prefer that you take all the time you need, man. Hey, bro. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was worried about the same thing, but it worked out pretty exactly now. So.
It was perfect, man. Anyway, so we've got a couple of questions for you, man. So I'll start off with something easy. So this is actually from Cooper. He asked, you were mentioning a lot about iOS as leading in the exploit prevention kind of scene, right? But do you see that Android keeping up, catching up, falling behind?
Yeah, I kind of noticed that at the end of my presentation that I was focusing a lot on iOS, and that's because personally I've taken more of an interest in iOS. But that's not to say other platforms aren't doing the same thing. I feel like Android is hard to say because it's an it's kind of a operating system, but it depends on how vendors deploy it as to how secure it is. Google's deployment, like with the Pixels, is particularly good. Usually, it doesn't have a lot of extra vendorware. They put a lot of work into the Titan tips and stuff like that. So Samsung increasingly has done a really good job. Their security used to be really bad, and this is also true of Huawei. Both of these vendors used to have pretty shocking security, but have improved tremendously over the past few years. I will say for the average person, though, that iOS, I would say, is more secure from their particular threat model. But for other threat models, that might not be as true. The high-value targets and things like that is potentially worth re-examining because iOS has like a larger remote attack surface, I think, and that has been shown with like a lot of iMessage vulnerabilities we've had in the wild and that kind of thing. And I also would say that Microsoft has actually done really well over the past few years. There was a bunch of Microsoft stuff that I ended up cutting out of the talk, but if you go and follow David Weston on Twitter, he's a Microsoft guy. He's always talking about what they're up to. He gave a really great speech at Black Hat in 2016 that talked about not only the mitigations and stuff that they're putting in place, but the data behind it, like why they decided to do the mitigations they did and stuff like that. And that's really interesting as well.
Cool. So actually talking about Google, right? And they've got some insane computing power when it comes to fuzzing, right? So this is a question from a guest, so we don't really know who asked this question, but the question is the power of Google's fuzzing engines versus a single researcher. How can you expect to find cool bugs? As in when you're going up against a company that's fuzzing like 29,000 bugs or something like that, right? Like by the time you find something, it's patched, right?
So definitely Google's compute infrastructure creates a problem for an offensive researcher looking to find vulnerabilities. But basically, there's still ways you can find vulnerabilities, and usually the strategies you have is you can fuzz, but generally you can't fuzz as aggressively as them. So you have to try and fuzz more intelligently. You have to put more of your own, looking for very specific things that you know about, maybe bug classes that aren't talked about a lot, or that they don't have provisions for in their large-scale fuzzing. And of course, there's also manual code inspection where you have the potential to find unusual bugs, which again are unlikely to come up in fuzzing. So if you are fuzzing against Google and even other companies, Mozilla and stuff, you have to do something unique in order to, I think, find a vulnerability that's going to last longer than like a week or two.
Do you think that, most of the fuzzing tools actually have evolved to keep up with trying to find the bugs? Because, you're looking at Google and they got distributed computing, everything's in the cloud, right? They're going to be able to fuzz a lot more, right? So what kind of tools would you suggest, if you are trying to find bugs, right, in iOS? What kind of tool sets would you be looking at?
I mean, I think there's a number of fuzzing technologies that you can use to help you fuzzing, but if you're using the same tools as other people, your vulnerabilities aren't going to last very long. Basically, you have to do something unique. So whatever tools you choose, you're still going to have to add some of your own logic. And so what generally people do is use fuzzing stuff that exists, but they'll just use it as a component of a fuzzing suite. So, everyone integrates AFL in one form or another, and everyone uses ASAN and all this kind of stuff. But on top of that, you kind of want to put in your own sort of unique things that you're looking for, I suppose, and that's the only way you're going to extract value. So I don't know about a specific tool I can tell you, because I don't think that really you can just download a tool and run it and have a huge amount of success. And even, like I said, even if you find stuff, I don't think it will last longer than a week or two. But, you can use them as a base to start, putting more of your own stuff in it. You can get syscaller and all these kind of things, and, start building on them. And so, I'm not sure about just something off the shelf.
Probably the instant, man. That's the exact reason why you can't find one.
Yeah.
So a question from another guest. Exploit sales versus techniques. Are the prices increasing because researchers are essentially selling techniques rather than individual exploits? As in, now it's a chain, right? So do you think the prices are increasing because of that?
So I'm not sure that I've ever seen evidence of someone just selling a technique per se. This discussion actually did come up on Twitter a fair while ago, I think it was with Alyssa Assange, who I referred to in my presentation, and she said something about it, but I can't remember what her conclusion was. But as far as I know, I haven't seen people sell techniques per se, except if in cases where the technique is like a significant bypass in itself. So, for example, you might be able to sell a component that is just a pack bypass or something like that. And you go, if you've got a kernel bug and you use this, then you can do this. So there is instances of selling those as standalone vulnerabilities, I think, but not selling techniques as in hey, if you can write to anywhere in memory blindly on the iOS kernel, here's a way to turn it into, arbitrary memory read-write reliably without an info leak. Mm-hmm. That'd be a useful technique, but I've never at least seen evidence of selling that as a standalone thing. Yeah.
Let's see, what else do we have here? Okay, so there's a question. I'm not sure whether you can answer this or not, but the question is, can you tell us the behind-the-scenes stories of what happened with the FBI? No.
Not really. I don't think that story's ever been validated or publicly affirmed.
Okay. So let's just pretend, right? Like, I mean, if you are a security researcher and the FBI comes to you and asks you to do something, right? Like, what choices do you have? Can you actually say no? Or would that not be advisable?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think in Western countries, law enforcement really shows up at your door and forces you to do stuff. And furthermore, I don't live in America. But yeah, like, I mean, who can say? I think in some other countries where they're more authoritarian regimes, they totally do that all the time.
What about this is just from my own question, as in like for the legal threat from Apple, right? Like if you were to, help law enforcement to unlock something and then they come about and tell you like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. Like as an individual researcher, should you be concerned about that or, quote unquote, greater good? I mean, like there's loads of arguments for it, for and against, obviously. So, I mean, in your opinion, what do you think?
Not really. So, I mean, doing vulnerability research as an individual, I mean, there's nothing illegal about it. You're totally allowed to do it. And then, where you start running into trouble is kind of like I alluded to in my presentation, which is if you, deploy tools offensively that, utilize infrastructure to a significant degree to like migrate or something like that, then you might start seeing yourself in legal trouble. Having said that, I would guess that even in those cases, like the researcher wouldn't get in trouble. It's whoever's deploying it would get in trouble. You can make any offensive research that you want. It's only illegal if someone deploys it in a situation where they don't have the authority to do so, right?
Makes sense. I got a question here. What's your opinion on Corellium?
I mean, I've been pretty supportive of them publicly. I think their technology is really like crazy good. And iPhone is a particularly difficult target to research because, for a number of reasons. One is you have to basically jailbreak it in order to do any real research. And even when you jailbreak it, you've got this really crappy semi-debug environment. You can't debug the kernel usually, with a few exceptions. Brandon Azad made a thing. In fact, the checkmate stuff sort of made it possible to do some of this debugging kind of nicely. But you've got to jailbreak the phone. A lot of the times you can't upgrade and downgrade and stuff like that. It's just very restrictive. And being able to have a virtual machine where you go, spin up an iPhone 10 and install iOS, 13 on it. I want to look at that. Is a really useful capability. And within 5 minutes of installing it, you're like, okay, I can debug stuff. I can put files on it. I can run them, kind of thing. And another thing, so of course, Apple now has the security research devices, but only a few people have those, and it's at the behest of Apple. And even with things like checkmate and stuff where you're able to perhaps do some meaningful debugging, you still have the problem that you can't do things at scale. Mm-hmm. One of the advantages of Corellium is you can programmatically spin up 1,000 instances of different phones and do fuzzing or testing or, whatever you want. And so I think that's, I think that's a really good advantage for security researchers as well. And lastly, for doing things like if you're doing app pen testing and stuff like that, I think it's really useful for that because, again, you don't have to jailbreak the phone. If you're just, some company that pen tests apps, you don't have to jailbreak the phone and have like a 10 versions old phone and all this. You can spin up the most modern version and hopefully create reproducible results. You can put the app on your phone. You can produce a result, and then you can give the result to someone and go, here's a snapshot of me doing it. Like, here's the proof of it. So I think it's got a lot of advantages, quite frankly.
Shimon, you want to take a question?
I think there's just one last one left, which is back to your point. Is jailbreaking dead, or is there still advantages to using it now?
No, I don't think it's dead. A lot of the times public jailbreaks tend not to come out because of the value of the commercial value of them, I suppose. But having said that, over the last way back in iOS 6 or 7, I started thinking this is pretty hard. I don't think people are just going to continue releasing these for free. And at the time, a lot of Western groups stopped releasing, and Chinese groups were releasing jailbreaks for whatever motivations they had. But beyond that, I don't think jailbreaking is dead, just because, firstly, every now and then a vulnerability comes along that is really useful for jailbreaking, when Checkmate came out of nowhere, and that has reinvigorated jailbreaking and the ability to do meaningful debugging on recent versions of iOS in a way that no other bug has since 24K Pwn or something like that, because it was in the boot ROM, you couldn't fix it. And so that was really good for jailbreaking. Additionally, I would say that every now and then groups like Project Zero basically bring out either a partial or pretty complete jailbreak tool set. Like I referred to before, Brandon Azard did it before. He's like, hey, you can actually do kernel debugging with this vulnerability I found, kind of thing. So I think every now and then those groups also produce tools that are useful. But having said that, the ones that are like Project Zero are useful for security researchers, but for the general people that like jailbreaking so they can use Cydia or something, that's not going to be as useful for, perhaps.
So I would say also kind of the public jailbreaking kind of scene has more or less died because a lot of the guys got hired, right? People ended up working at Apple, or they got ended up working in Azimuth, for example, and then it's kind of they stopped producing the jailbreaks, right?
Yeah, that happened to an extent. Like I said, at some point in time, a bunch of Chinese groups took over, and it seemed like they were being financially incentivized to do so. But then there's this weird situation now where the Chinese government, I think, is being more restrictive about just releasing vulnerabilities at Pwn to Own and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know the latest on that and how that will impact those groups, but at least regular releases of public jailbreaks, you're right, has completely dried up.
Yeah.
And was supplanted by, the Checkmate and Pongo OS and all that kind of stuff for at least a little while. But as that diminishes, then I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Cool, man. I don't think we have any other questions, but we still have about 11 minutes left. Is there anything you can chat about other stuff if you like, or if anything in particular you want to tell us about?
What would you like to hear about?
I want to know what you guys have been working on recently, as in personally, Azimuth, right? What's the latest and greatest stuff? Any new tools, any new stuff that you guys can publicly disclose at this point?
There's not a lot of stuff to publicly disclose, although we have, for some period of time, been sort of planning to relaunch a blog, which I think is going to happen shortly. And we had a couple of things that we wanted to publish on that. One thing that we did fairly recently is one of the staff members entered Pwn to Own this year and did an exploit for parallels. And so he's actually written that up, and the nature of the bug and the exploit methodology that he employed to do that.
Awesome.
There's been a couple of other we had another researcher analyze an in the wild Chrome exploit that we were we were about to publish our analysis, but then Google or someone did. So we're like, but we might just put that out anyway. And so and there's a couple of other things that we were sort of planning to put out there as well in terms of tooling and stuff like that. So that there is stuff in the works that is going to come out at some point in time, presumably. But I'm not sure exactly when, to be honest.
Are you guys up for traveling this year, or no travel plans at all? Like, I'm not sure what the legal possibilities are for making a trip out of Australia, but are you guys planning anything?
So I really would like to. I was hoping to go to Black Hat this year, and obviously originally I was hoping to come to Hack in the Box. The situation in Australia is more or less that you can't really travel unless you have an exemption to travel, and you can get an exemption for various reasons like family, or if you have a compelling business reason, you can go, but they're being, I think, handed out rather sparingly.
Right.
So it's not easy to just go, you know what, I want to go to a conference in Vegas. And they're like, oh, cool. As I understand it, we're not really going to be able to do international travel until, I don't know, December or January or something. But when we can, obviously I will be back around. I really hope to be able to go to Offensive Con in February next year. And, all the others, Black Hat, etc., as the year progresses. So we just we'll get vaccinated, I guess.
Yeah, man, get our vaccines, keep our fingers crossed. We're planning to do something in person in November. At least now we're still planning to do it. Hopefully we'll be able to, but who knows, man. This year and last has been just unprecedented, as we know. Anyway, and thanks so much for joining us, bro. I believe we are missing your slides. So if you could just email that over to me, I'll shoot that out on the website. So people...
Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
No worries, man.
Yeah, I'll email over the slides, and a lot of the things that I alluded to in the presentation, they in the footers, they have the links to the actual presentations and stuff like that. So there's a lot of really interesting research coming out. And it's definitely worth checking some of them out, because there's some really cool stuff that's been coming out the last year, and it's kind of exciting to watch. So go check those out.
Excellent, man. Thanks again so much for the brilliant keynote and for taking the time to join us, even though it's virtual. For those who are watching this not live, but they're going to watch it in a couple of days' time, if you have a follow-up question from Mark that obviously we didn't ask him, please feel free to tweet him. He's at mdowd on Twitter. Thanks again, Mark.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome.
No worries. Thanks for having me. It's been good chatting, and I hope to see you in person sometime next year, I guess.
Likewise, man. As soon as we can, bro. As soon as we can. Stay safe, brother.
See you.
See you, man. Ciao.